morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, September 26th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by the people's champ himself. He is Matt Baxendell. Ohio State and Penn State will clash at 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, as you might have heard, in Happy Valley. Game televised by ABC. Buckeyes 4.5-point favorites as of this morning. Bax, first question, what makes you feel good about this matchup from the Buckeyes' perspective?
Well, a couple things. First of all, for everybody who's panicking about this whole whiteout thing, people need to remember that while Penn State has done a good job playing competitively with Ohio State, since 2002, Ohio State has won the series 12-4. That means 3 out of every 4 games Ohio State wins. And specifically in Happy Valley, in the whiteout situation, they're 3-2, 5-2 in games if you include the ones that ended after dark since that time period. So, you know, that's not that bad. Like, I just want to point that out to people. Like, we're all worried about this. Ooh, there's this scary crowd. Like, the crowd's going to be able to play or something. OSU has largely done well when they went there, so they've been successful. But as for on the field, in terms of matchups, I don't think Penn State's defense is remotely capable of slowing down Dwayne Haskins. Looking at the defensive line, it's a group that doesn't have that dynamic kind of guy coming off the edge like they've had in past years. There's no Aaron Maben on this team. It's a solid D-line, but it's not an elite D-line by any means. I think it's probably one of Penn State's weaker D-lines in the last couple of years. If you look at their defense in general, they've got a lot of younger guys. I don't see this defense slowing down Dwayne Haskins. So for all of Ohio State's concerns about the defense on our side of things, I think realistically speaking, it's going to take some very crazy things for me to believe that Dwayne Haskins won't have a huge night and his offense won't put up a ton of points. The Ohio State offensive line has proved itself to this point with me believing that they're going to be able to keep Haskins upright. And anybody who keeps Haskins upright is going to lose to Dwayne Haskins. I don't care if it's Penn State, Tulane, or Alabama. If Haskins has time to throw, he's going to beat you.
What concerns you the most? I mean, obviously Ohio State's defense has been leaky to say the least, but what concerns you the most about this matchup?
Let's see here. Trace McSorley's a good runner, and Miles Sanders is a good runner, and Ohio State's starting linebackers last week didn't have a single tackle. That would be my number one flippin' concern about this game. Do we need to be any more obvious about it? Like, that's the blunt truth of it, is that, you know, they told me, yay, Tough Borland doesn't have a snap count anymore. Is Tough healthy enough? Like, really, like, he doesn't have the same explosion like he did last year. I think Malik Harrison's probably played pretty well. Urban seemed to agree with that with his call-in show, saying that he thinks that Malik's playing at a pretty high level. And of the 3, I think he's been the best. But the truth is Ohio State's linebackers have over-pursued at times. And if Ohio State's going to give up points in this game, in all likelihood it's going to be because the McSorley-Sanders combo is hitting holes and running for big gains. Sanders is a very good tailback. He's no Saquon Barkley, but he's a very good tailback. And McSorley is a tough gamer kind of runner guy. You know, he's like all Penn State quarterbacks. He has moxie, but he's a good player. He's going to move the ball downfield. And, you know, the truth be told is that they may have some success through the air because McSorley always throws 1 or 2 jump balls that inexplicably get caught when there's no way in the world they should be caught. But the truth is their running game is what's going to power that team. If you watch that Illinois game on last Friday, their running game powered the team. If you watch them come back against this murder pit in the second half 2 weeks ago, it was their running game that led the way. And their receivers aren't that fleet-footed. Ohio State has the athleticism in the secondary that they should do pretty well covering this group. Juwan Johnson's big, but he's not fast. You know, they've got some players in that wide receiver group that are okay, but nobody's going to burn you. There's nobody that really terrifies you as a game breaker. Their game breaker is going to be in the running game, especially coming off of an RPO or some of the read option that they like to do with McSorley and Sanders. And if the linebackers can actually play a good game, then Ohio State should have a fantastic opportunity to succeed. But, yeah, the idea of McSorley and Sanders running wild against the linebackers that have massively underachieved for Ohio State is a giant concern.
If Nick Bosa even has, like, one setback in his recovery, I mean, his college career could be over. I mean, this really sucks because we're talking about perhaps the best player in college football, period, clearly the best defensive end. You know, he's obviously in the discussion to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2019 NFL draft. Yeah, my gut tells me he's still going to play this season. I still think he's going to come back and even play in the regular season in November. And then, you know, postseason, I think he'll be there, especially if the Buckeyes are in the playoffs. I don't think there's no way Nick Bosa is going to take the playoffs. If he's able to play and the Buckeyes are in the playoffs, he's not taking that off. And I'll say this, Denzel Ward would have done the same thing. If the Buckeyes were in the playoffs last year, not just a Cotton Bowl that was basically an exhibition game, I have no doubt Denzel Ward would have played if the Buckeyes were in the playoffs. But just, I do have, so I'm confident, but I wouldn't bet my house on it that Nick Bosa is going to play again this season because, again, Bax, if he has one setback, his college career could be over.
Yeah, and he's also got way too much of an earning potential to even try to go on the field and, tough it out, quote unquote. There's no way, shape, or form that Nick Bosa is not going to go on the field if they're not overly cautious that he's healthy. And let's be real blunt here, though. After this Saturday, when's the next time Ohio State actually needs Nick Bosa? Like November 10th against Michigan State? Like, realistically speaking, look at their next couple games. Indiana at home. Minnesota at home. The trip to Purdue, which is your, quote-unquote trap game that we're going to talk about being a trap so much it's not a trap anymore. Then they have the week off. And then they have Nebraska in the horseshoe. And Nebraska looks god-awful up to this point. So Ohio State, if they can get through this Penn State game, doesn't need Bosa. I don't want to say it's a blessing he got hurt, but he's going to have a lot less wear and tear on him if he's able to rehab and come back healthy in November. And really then, if you have Nick Bosa, say, on a pitch count against Michigan State where, hey, you bring him in on 3rd and long, and that's it. You get him 15 snaps. He's like the hockey player who only plays on the power play, right? And then the next week's Maryland. You don't have to play him for that game. Let him rest and recover, and then you got Michigan. And let's be honest here. You just mentioned Denzel Ward. I'll go back even further. Brad Roby, 2013. If the Buckeyes are able to play, if they've managed to beat Michigan State and they're playing Florida State for the national championship in the last year of the BCS, Brad Roby's playing in that game. We all know that. It's a business decision for some of these top guys to sit out when there's nothing really to be gained with a win. A playoff situation, Nick Bosa will play. He's a freaking Bosa. Let's be honest here. But Ohio State's also not going to jeopardize his career. They're not going to jeopardize his future, and they're not going to rush him back. And honestly, he may not even play against Michigan State. We may not see him again until the game. But I will say this to people who are concerned about the loss of Nick Bosa. Yes, I'll echo you, Dave. It absolutely sucks that Nick Bosa's out. In my money, he was the best player at any position in college football this year. And I'm including Dwayne Haskins, who everybody who's ever heard me talk knows I have a giant man crush on and believe he's the best quarterback in the country. But the truth is, while it sucks, there's precedent for this. Remember when Ohio State lost John Simon in 2012 for the Michigan game? The Buckeyes D-line looked great in that game too. There's always plenty of guys on this team who are high-level defensive players. And you know what? Just means Chase Young, Jonathan Cooper, Deshaun Cornell, all those guys you have to keep continuing to play at a high level. And with the depth at defensive tackle OSU has, this is a problem that everybody else in the country would love to die for. This D-line, even though you don't have Nick Bosa, outside of maybe Bama and Clemson, who else wouldn't trade their D-line for the one OSU still has? So that's one of the great things about the way OSU recruits. There's still so much talent on this line.
A couple of freshmen I've been really impressed with. There's a lot of freshmen, but guys that maybe are flying a little under the radar. Tyler Friday, who's going to have to play relatively big role this Saturday and going forward till Bosa returns. I've been really impressed with Tyler Friday. A lot of people thought he might be more of a D tackle. He looks like a DN to me. 6'3", 261, and I saw him after practice last night. The guy, he looks the part. Tyreke Smith is a guy that a lot of people have talked about, and I like Tyreke Smith a lot too. But I think we sometimes forget Tyler Friday is also was a top 100 recruit. Both Tyreke Smith and Tyler Friday were both top 100 recruits in the 2018 class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. So Tyler Friday is a guy that I think is a little under the radar, and Chris Olave, he's a guy that they're so deep and so talented and so veteran. I don't remember a wide receiver core this veteran backs. We're talking about 3 fifth-year seniors, a 4th-year junior, and 2 juniors are the top 6 guys. It's just crazy. But Chris Olave as a true freshman is really impressing me. But just your thoughts on Tyler Friday and Chris Olave. These 2 guys look like they have bright futures.
Yeah, they're not the only ones. So let's be honest here. I was going to make sure we mentioned Tyreke Smith because he's sort of been the 4th/5th guy on that line. But this is what happens when you bring in a recruiting class where you have a dozen kids who are top 100 national players. I mean, think about it this way. We're talking about Shaun Wade this year. We didn't talk about him at all last year, and he was the number 1 or 2 corner in the country, depending on the rating you were looking at, with Jeff Okudah, who, by the way, is also on the Buckeyes and didn't play a ton last year. So This is what happens when you recruit all these high-end guys. I mean, we haven't even talked about a guy like Marcus Williamson, who looks very capable every time we see him. He's just behind a lot of people ahead of him. We could talk about guys like Josh Proctor that we can't wait to see. There's a whole host of guys that were in this last class that we're just like, yep, can't wait to see them on the field. It's going to be a while because there's so many good players ahead of them. That's just what happens when you stack classes like Ohio State does. It's not like it was even under the Tressel era where you'd have like a really great year and then an okay year. And then you'd have a really great year and then another okay year. And in the interim, you often had a time where a freshman or a sophomore would just explode onto the scene and get all this run because he was better than the guys who didn't pan out from some of the lower-rated classes above him. That doesn't happen when you're always in the top 5. You're always competing with guys who are at an elite level. That's why we see so many guys transfer out for playing time. Go say hi to Antonio Williams down at North Carolina right now, who's running wild. And that's a guy who barely could get on the field last year because of the depth of his position at Ohio State. Joe Burrow is 4-0 as the starting quarterback at LSU. They've already spelled his name with X's, and everybody's thinking that LSU could be a dark horse for the playoffs. And that's because he couldn't start at Ohio State. You bring in talent at this level, you're always going to have elite young guys who we just don't get to see the field yet because there's guys who are experienced, have developed their bodies in the program for a couple of years, and have earned that time to be on the field. And unless you are truly phenomenal and outstanding, like Nick Bosa was, for example, you're not going to get on the field right away just because there's so many already good, solid, strong, capable players that are more of a known commodity. These OSU classes, the way they recruit, I can't emphasize enough, Dave. We've really never seen this. Every year being just lights out. The ballpark is never lower than 5th or 6th in the country. There's always athletes at every position. This is the most stacked Ohio State's program has literally ever been in terms of talent from all the recruiting. Ohio State's recruited extraordinarily in the past. There's no doubt about it. But there's no year where they're not extraordinary. This year everybody's like, oh no, we're only 15th. By the end of the year, we'll probably only be 5th or 6th. Like, that's a disappointment because we're so used to being 1st or 2nd or 3rd or 4th. There's so much talent on hand that you're going to have guys like Tyler Fraddick. You're going to have guys like Tyreke Smith that were like, yeah, in a year or two, they're going to be fantastic. They're going to be the front-of-the-line guys. That was Chase Young last year. That's just how it goes when you're in a program like Ohio State with a guy like Urban Meyer in charge recruiting at this level. It is just the baseline. And when you talk about next man up, it's a completely different ballgame than it is at a mid-level Big Ten program or a MAC school where there really is no next man who's even remotely capable if you have a star-level player.
Ohio State's fortunate that, if Mike Weber, if his injury does linger, they got J.K. Dobbins. If Dobbins stays healthy, he can play the entire game and hold the fort down, but it's nice to have that 1-2 punch, and it looks like the Buckeyes will have that 1-2 punch. And again, you never know. I mean, Weber could re-injure his foot, his leg, whatever's going on there. But Urban Meyer said that Mike Weber's going to play this week. We got a chance to talk to Kevin Wilson after practice last night. He said Weber's good to go. We watched Weber walk off the field. He looked good. Of course, not like we were watching him like actually run the football and get tackled, but he wasn't walking with a limp or anything like that. He wasn't walking with the team trainers like he was last week. But so we'll see. But that's some good news. It looks like Mike Weber's good to go for this Saturday.
Yeah, and we talk about depth, too. We could just casually say, hey, by the way, DeMario McCall is a guy who was an extremely highly rated guy and looked awesome as Mike Weber's backup till J.K. Dobbins arrived last year. And he's a guy who barely has touched the ball this year. So that's another thing that happens when you talk about depth at Ohio State. But, you want Mike Weber to be healthy. He's a little bit more of a power runner than J.K. Dobbins. We get into a 3rd and 1 situation in this game where let's say Ohio State's up by a field goal and there's 1:55 left, then you need a yard. You want to give Mike Weber the ball. Right, he's the guy you want to have run the ball up the middle. He's a power runner. So if he's healthy, now granted, I'm not going to pigeonhole him as a power runner because let's face it, he's had some times where his top end speed this last year has surprised us, and it's certainly something that's a credit to him for once he's fully healthy, seeing how good he can be. But he's a little more powerful than Dobbins. It's very important that OSU has that guy. He's kind of the hammer, and in a game like this where you can have both of your tailbacks able to go and keep each other fresh and wear down a defense, that's a huge thing for Ohio State. With a veteran like Weber to go at the same time with a young guy like Dobbins, this is important for Ohio State to have both those guys. Because what do we talk about when we talk about changing the offense from the J.T. Barrett setup that we sort of saw? We talked about those carries that normally went to J.T. Barrett going to an NFL caliber running back instead. It's saying, hey, instead of J.T. running it 15 times and Dobbins running it 12 times and Mike Weber getting 4 carries, Dobbins is going to run it 16 and Weber's going to run it 14, and there's your 30. And Dwayne Haskins will hold on to one keeper and waltz into the end zone, right? And That's the value of having two of these elite tailbacks in the offense that OSU runs right now, where your quarterback isn't relied on to run the football at all. And if Mike Weber is healthy for that game on Saturday, and let's face it, I think we all think that he's going to be, at least for the start of the game, that's a big thing for Ohio State. Because, by the way, we talk with Penn State right now about how good Miles Sanders is, right? Their backup is now out for the season. They don't have the same depth like Ohio State does at the tailback position. They are in that position where their quarterback, who's supposed to be the guy who they need to throw the football accurately if they fall behind, well, he's going to have to absorb a ton of hits because they only have one option at the running back position now. Ohio State's not going to have that issue. The only way Haskins is going to absorb a bunch of hits is if the O-line breaks down, and I don't see that happening.
Great stuff, as always, from the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. You can catch Bax's column every Sunday. It's must-read material, as most of you know. It is The Bucket. If you don't know, now you know. Read The Bucket every Sunday. He is Matt Baxendell. He is the People's Champ. I am Dave Biddle. And thank you to Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best NBA in the land.